Imagine that you earn $1.25 a day. $1.25 a day, that's your income. That's all you have to feed yourself and your family, not to mention pay for rent, school fees, medical bills, and anything else that comes your way. Now, imagine that the price of bread just doubled. What are you going to cut back on? Will you take your kids out of school so that you can afford to buy food? Will you find cheaper alternative food that's also less nutritious? Or will you make the simple decision to go from the 2 meals a day that you get right now down to 1 meal a day? Around 1.4 billion people in our world live on less than $1.25 a day. And these are the kind of impossible choices that they have to make every day. It's important for us to see and hear statistics like this because we need to get the big picture of what's really going on in our world. Because a lot of times we live really sheltered lives, don't we? But one of the dangers of statistics is that they become really numbing to us. How many of you have ever experienced that, where it's like you hear statistic after statistic and it just kind of numbs you? We hear so many of these numbers and about so many different things, and it can easily become then nothing more than a number to us, doesn't it? We forget that we easily forget that each one of those numbers represents a real person. Someone's child, someone's parent, someone's grandparent, someone's sibling, someone's relative. Because I promise you that if this was one of your own close relatives who has experienced this, who is living through these kind of circumstances, I doubt it that you would probably be just sitting by idly while it happened. How many of you have ever had relatives that have gone through difficult situations? How many of you have done everything in your power to say, man, I want to help this person? When that tragedy hits home, when that hardship has a name and a face, it's a whole different story, isn't it? Most of us wouldn't, if a baby showed up on our doorstep, just walk by and ignore it, would we? Maybe for a minute. But there's no way we'd sleep that night knowing that there's a child that needs us on our doorstep. But the reality is that these things are so distant and far off, and these statistics numb us. And so we need to hear these things, but we also need to fight the urge in us to allow these things to just be numbers. And we can fight that urge. We need to remember that these are real people who need our help. When we talk about 1 billion people, every one of those billion people, if you think of, I can't even fathom it, but 1 billion people lined up, every one of those people has a name and a face. Every one of those people is somebody's mother, brother, sister, uncle, aunt, grandparent. Every one of those people matter to God. Imagine what it would be like to go to bed hungry every night and to pray to God that somebody would hear your cries and do something to help change your circumstances. Put yourself in their shoes for a minute. What if that was me? Man, and I was crying out to God. Wouldn't you wish beyond anything that somebody like us would hear your cries and do something? Imagine if that was your reality, and no matter how hard you tried, there was nothing you could do to change it. You work 24 hours a day, 3 jobs, 4 jobs. That's the reality that a lot of these people do, and you can't change the circumstance that you're in. You know, the other danger of statistics is that they can easily become overwhelming to us. So one thing is that they numb us. If we allow them just to be numbers, then that's all there is numbers, and they don't have a name and a face. But the other side of this is it can be really overwhelming. When you hear things like that 1 billion people experience hunger every single day, and you try to fathom what that is, it can be overwhelming, and we can easily begin to think that it's impossible to make a difference. And so we end up not doing anything. Again, we forget that these are real people, and that whatever we do, however big or small, it matters to someone. I want to share a story with you this morning. Some of you may have heard this story before. It's called the Starfish Story, and it goes something like this. One early morning after a fierce storm had hit the coast, I strolled to the beach for my morning walk. Horrified, I saw that tens of thousands of starfish had been washed up on the beach by the wind and waves. I was saddened by the realization that all of them would die, stranded on the shore, away from the life-giving water. Despairing that there was nothing I could do, I sat down on the sand and put my head in my hands. But then I heard a sound and I lifted my eyes. There in the distance I saw a man bending down and then standing up. Bending down and standing up again. So curious, I rose and I walked toward him. I saw that he was picking up the starfish one at a time and throwing them back into the sea. "What are you doing?" I yelled. "Saving the starfish," he replied. "But don't you see that there are tens of thousands of them?" I asked incredulously. "Nothing you can do will make a difference." He didn't answer me, but instead bent down, picked up another starfish, and cast it back into the water. Then he smiled, looked me in the eye, and said, "It made a difference to that one." Somebody once said, "Sometimes I would like to ask God why He allows poverty, suffering, and injustice when He could do something about it." Another person responded to him, "Well, why don't you ask Him?" His response? "Because I'm afraid He would ask me the same question." Last weekend, myself, 7 other adults, and 15 kids participated in the 30-hour famine. We decided together that it's not okay that this stuff is happening around the world, and we're going to do something about it. And so we partnered with World Vision and thousands of other people around the country and went without food for 30 hours and raised money to try to change some of these statistics. I had no idea going into this what sort of money our little group would be able to raise, but knew however big or small it was that it'd make a difference. I'm so proud to stand before you today and announce that our little group of students and adults raised over $3,200 for the 30-hour famine. Isn't that cool? Yeah. Now keep in mind that it takes just $1 to feed a child for a day. One of the things we did during our 30-hour famine event was made this fingerprint banner that you see hanging over here on the wall. Each one of those fingerprints on that banner represents $1 that we raised and one child who will be fed for a day. It's kind of a cool visual representation of the impact that we were able to have, to look at that and go, man, every one of those represents a life that we affected. $1 feeds a child for a day, $30 feeds a child for a month, and $360 feeds a child for an entire year, which is crazy. I mean, think about the things that we spend $360 on and think nothing about, and to think that money could feed a child for an entire year. So there are about 9 children who would have otherwise likely died that will eat, and more than that, live for, at the very least, another year, because 15 kids and 8 adults had the courage to stand up and say, I'm going to do something. There are 9 kids that will live because of that. Most of these kids actually will go on to live full, healthy lives because one of the things World Vision is very committed to is not just working to meet the short-term, temporary needs of hunger, only to have these people return to the cycle of hunger and poverty, but they're really working to identify what are the root issues that are causing these sort of systems, and to work to address those things and to provide sustainable sources of living for these people who are in so much need. And so it's not just about saying, here's a handout, eat for so many days, and then you're going to find yourself back in the same circumstance. They're changing the circumstances for these people by really addressing the root issues. This is the kind of stuff that our money was able to do. I wanted to give you the opportunity this morning to hear from a couple of the students who participated in the famine firsthand. And so Josh, you want to come forward? Josh Boehm was one of the kids who participated. And Josh, why don't you come take the mic and just share for a minute what the famine meant to you, any significant points that stood out?
Good morning. When we did the famine, after it was done, it was like, I was starving, but like, you think about it, sorry, and just that's like a 1% of what all the other kids go through, and and it's just kind of like heartwarming that we raised the $3,200 for kids that actually needed it. And throughout the thing, Scott pointed out a couple things that we could do, like if you're at a restaurant, like don't order soda, and maybe you go out to eat like once a week. And that's $2 every time you go out. That's $100 a year. That can feed 3 kids for a whole entire month. And that's just one small thing. You could do hundreds of others, and yeah, it's pretty cool. So, yeah.
Thanks, man. Yeah, one of the things we talked about, and you'll have a chance after in a little bit to see a video with some of the highlights and stuff from our weekend. But it was really cool that one of the things World Vision put together as part of this was an experience called Tribe. And what it was is it's like a Survivor type challenge. You guys watch the show Survivor on TV? It was that type of thing, but it was designed to allow the kids to experience, and it was 6 different challenges. It was designed to allow them to experience what real people went through when the earthquake hit Haiti last year in January of 2010. And so we actually walked through this whole experience, and we experienced the earthquake and what that would be like. And they sat in silence. The earthquake lasted for 35 seconds. They sat in silence for 35 seconds while we shook the tables and stuff. And you begin to experience just a little bit of like what that was really like for people sitting there. They all got an identity card that was, they took on the identity of a real kid who lived through that earthquake, and they got to read on the back of their card their whole story. Some of them actually sustained injuries during the earthquake, and so the kids actually had to play. If they had a broken arm, they literally had to tie their arm up, and all of the challenges, they couldn't use their arm. And so we began to experience like what this is like. We had a number of videos that we watched that talked about the reality of, just gave them a picture of the reality of the circumstances for a lot of these kids. But as Josh mentioned, one of the things we really tried to do is to be practical too, and say, look, it's cool that we can come together and do a 30-hour famine event like this, and it's cool that we can raise $3,200 and affect 9 kids' lives, but the truth is that the numbers are still staggering, and there's so much left for us to do that we can't stop. And so many of us look at statistics like that and we just say, there's nothing I can do. And the truth is that that's the farthest thing from the truth. And so Josh mentioned one of the things that we talked about was, I asked the kids, how many of you guys go out to eat once or twice or several times a week? How many of you guys drink soda when you go out to eat? How much do you pay for that soda? The reality is almost everybody in the room said they go out to eat at least once a week. Most of those families represented 4 or 5 kids, 4 or 5 people in their family, all of them ordering soda. And most of the time you pay about $2 for a soda at a restaurant. Well, what if instead of making a radical life change like saying we're never going to go out to eat again, which is extreme and that's hard, and how many of us would really be able to do that? What if we just said, hey, we're going to make a conscious choice not to drink soda when we go out to eat. And we're going to take that money that we would have spent on soda, because we would have spent it anyways, and we're going to put that to help feed the hungry. A simple adjustment that you can make in your life that, it costs you something, but in comparison, it's a minor sacrifice. But we talked about the impact that could have. We had 15 kids, all of them with 5 or so people in their family who all go out to eat just once a week. That's $2 a shot once a week times 15 kids. That's what? Somebody do the math. $30, right? Something like that. Am I figuring that right? Well, that'd be one kid, so times that by 5. Anyway, you get the picture. It came out to something like, we did the math there, and it came out to close to, if just those 15 kids and their families made that decision, in a year we would raise $8,000.